Hi there. I'm Frater IAC, and this is the my second video on initiation into Hermetics Step 1. And this one I have titled Spirit Exercise 2A. Okay, so when you read the book, it has thought control, which we did in the last video, thought discipline here, and then there's a third exercise, but thought discipline is actually divided into two separate exercises if you read that section in the book, okay? The first one is essentially what we know as mindfulness, living and being conscious in the present moment. That's huge. That's going to help you in so many ways it's not even funny, to the point where it merits its own separate video. And then the second part of this exercise is going to be exercise 2B, um, and that is focused concentration, equally important and equally useful, but in a different way. So let's start by delving in to what Bardon actually says about exercise 2A, this thing called mindfulness. Now, if we look at this first paragraph, these are Bardon's words. I took it directly out of the book. So, for example, he says, we must be able to occupy ourselves no longer with the chores and annoyances of our professional life when we are at home or in our private life. We must avoid all thoughts that do not belong in our private life, and we must succeed in becoming a different person immediately, and vice versa. While we are at work or pursuing our profession, we have to direct all our thoughts towards our work and not allow them to be elsewhere, like at home or with private matters. Okay, so essentially what he's telling you is when you're at work, think about work, focus on work. When you're at home, think about home and family, focus on home and family. When you're with friends, think about being with friends. And the subtext of this is being completely present in the eternal now. That's what we're doing here. So now look at this gold paragraph here below, because this is kind of the crux of it. This kind of tells you what you're looking at here in terms of the assignment. This, meaning mindfulness, has to be practiced until it becomes a habit. And above all, you must become accustomed to performing all tasks with complete awareness, whether it be in your profession or your private life, regardless of whether you are dealing with something big or something small. This exercise has to be practiced for the rest of your life. Why? Because it hones the spirit and strengthens the consciousness and memory. Back to that last sentence, regardless of whether you're dealing with something major or not, I saw on Facebook something that was really profound. I have cats. I've had dogs, but now I've got cats. And one of the a post on Facebook that I was reading that really hit me in a good way was, for your cat is a short chapter in the book of your life, because they don't live as long as you do, right? Cat's going to live maybe 14, 16, 18 years and then they're gone. You're going to live to 80. So if you've got a cat, that cat is merely a chapter in that longer span that is your life. But for the cat, you are the whole book. And so it's a good idea to be present. And, when you're with your pet, spend some quality time with them. And next time you're doing that, if you have a pet and you're spending quality time, you're taking them on a walk, you're doing whatever, be completely present with that pet, right? Just a nice way to practice this. So, anyway, enough of that. Oh my goodness. It's the three fates out of the Greek mythology. And these three fates are named Lachesis, Clotho, and Atropos, and they all have a different job as relates to each human life. Okay, so Lachesis there is on the right, and she represents birth, right? So here's this big skein of yarn, and she's taken one strand, which represents the birth and lifespan of one human being, and the other person that has the other end of that string is Clotho, and she represents the life of that human, right? And then here in the middle, we have the ever cheerful Atropos. Look at that smile. Now she has a open pair of scissors, and she's going to cut that thread when she figures it's time for that person to die. And when she cuts the thread, that person goes into the next realm. Isn't that fun? Or not? Anyway, why in the world am I even bringing this up? Okay, I like art. All right, this is cool. This is a 1948 drawing, a multimedia drawing on woven paper. And that's why I put it on the slide, because this weave represents the tapestry of all human life. Ah, or you could consider it maybe in wave form, which we're going to do on the next slide. Because look at this. I want to talk here about the power of you, okay? Because most uninitiated people have no idea how powerful their feelings are, how powerful their thoughts are, their words, their actions. They just go through life oblivious to the effect these things are having around them. Why? Well, this is a sound wave. And I thought it was a good visual depiction of what I'm going to talk about here, because every time you have a feeling thought, because usually thoughts may arise from a feeling, or a feeling may be added to a thought, and together the feeling thought is a very powerful form. And every time you have a thought feeling, it sends out massive ripples into the universe. And those ripples don't really ever stop, they just expand. But the problem is there's 8.2 billion of us. And so your ripples that you're sending out are running into the ripples that other people are sending out. And we have this giant churning mess, which we call current events. Isn't that fun or not? But that said, it's amazing how powerful you are as a human being. And certainly your word is extremely powerful. And your actions, of course, create these ripples. So it's really important, because now you have chosen to go on this path of Hermetic initiation. And you have to start understanding how powerful you are and how you affect people around you. I mean, think about your job. Have you ever noticed at your job how there might be a person that is really negative, or maybe you're that person, but on a job or in a situation, if you're in a class or whatever, and there's one person that's really, really negative, they can drag the entire group down, can't they? That's what I'm talking about here. And so, what you're learning here with this mindfulness, and certainly with the soul mirrors and these other subsequent steps, because when we get into working with the elemental forces, you're taming all this stuff inside of yourself, because you have to take control of this rather than allowing it to take control of you. It's always a good idea to be wise about what you allow yourself to feel and think and say and do, right? Because you're sending out these ripples. You're already there. You're already home. You already have the power of divine providence within you. Because if you consider that we all, the Kabbalion, the first rule, the first law is that the universe is mental. In other words, what they're saying is we live and breathe and have our being within the divine mind, right? And so all of the bad ripples, the negative ripples, and we're going to talk about this at much more length in the soul mirror sections, but all these negative ripples are just as sacred as the positive ripples because they all teach. The problem is the negative ripples teach through the school of hard knocks, and suffering and deprivation, whereas the positive ripples, what has been called the plus pole, the virtues, those ripples come out and kind of steady the whole thing. So anyway, enough of that. Hold that thought. But the Kabbalion, I wanted to give you one more quote from the Kabbalion about the principle of vibration. Look at the bottom here. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. He who understands, or she who understands, the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power. And that's no lie, because later, when you become more advanced in this initiatory path, you're going to be able to start perceiving these different ripples. And even later, you're going to be starting to be able to go in and change or redirect some of these ripples. That is powerful and sacred magic. And if you don't have control of yourself, you're going to be like a bull in a china shop. It's a good idea to be in control. So that's mindfulness is the first step of that. So enough of this. Let's move on. And my friend Clint Sabom turned me on to The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Clint and I correspond from time to time, and I've known him for a couple of years now. He said, Frater, you ought to read this book because it's amazing and it really did a lot for me. And I was like, okay. So I bought the book and it blew me away. It just, wow, And let's just go ahead and look at this quote because this is the specific passage in this book that just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I'll tell you why. First, let's read it. Are you stressed? Are you so busy getting to the future that the present is reduced to just a means of getting there? Stress is caused by being here, but wanting to be there, or being in the present, but wanting to be in the future. It's a split that tears you apart inside. To create and live with such an inner split is insane. Wow. And then he goes on in the second paragraph to say if your mind carries a heavy burden of the past, you will experience more of the same because the past perpetuates itself through the lack of presence. Now let's look at this first paragraph again because my childhood was not without some rough patches. And the thing about that is, that caused me to live out in the future because we were always waiting. Dad, or my father, was a commission only sales guy. He sold real estate, and so that's feast or famine in the best of times. But it got pretty bad, and we didn't have any money coming in. But there was always that hope that Dad was going to make a deal and we're going to be swimming in money. We're going to be flush and tomorrow is going to be a better day. Do you see how detrimental something like that can be to your current state? So I was always living out in the future. I was always thinking, yeah, when I finish college, when dad makes a deal, when blah, blah, blah. And I was living out in the future and completely ignoring the great gift that is the now, right? And so, what that looked like on the ground is from my teen years well into my 30s, and maybe even a little bit into my early 40s, I was always restless. Like when I went somewhere, okay, and work doesn't count because you're scheduled to be at work from A to B, right? But when I was socializing with friends, when I was at a restaurant, when I was at a party, when I was at wherever, some leisure event or just hanging with friends, I would always feel this mysterious restlessness. And I never understood why. But like 10 minutes into it, I'd come over to my a friend's house, and there'd be 5 or 6 people over there, and we'd just be hanging together. And all of a sudden, I would have this just overwhelming urge. I've got to get out of here. I have to go. And it was this thing of living in the future. Present was never good enough, and I always had to escape into the future. See? And that's really, really destructive. And then later, after I learned to take care of that, I found there was a lot of guilt and, shame and, other emotions that I was nursing from past events in my life. I guess you could call them traumas, that I mean, those leave a imprint on you. And if you're nursing grudges, if you're nursing hurt, if you're hungering for revenge, you're living in the past. You're wasting this great thing that is in front of you right here and right now, the present moment. And that's what Eckhart Tolle is talking about here, you know? Um, you have to live in the now. So here, and then here's another book that I really like a lot. When I was on step one and looking at mindfulness, boy, I got this book because I had heard of Thich Nhat Hanh. I'd known about him for years, by the time I started getting serious about this. So when I was looking at mindfulness, gosh, I bought his book, The Miracle of Mindfulness. And my favorite quotation from this book, and it really helped me a lot. Okay, I highly recommend both of these books. But look at this. It's so zen, It's like, well, washing the dishes. One should only be washing the dishes, which means that while washing the dishes, one should be completely aware of the fact that one is washing the dishes. And he's not talking about some kind of meta analysis there where you're exerting your will to be aware of the fact that you're doing something. No, no, no. What he's talking about is living in the moment. Instead of washing the dishes and being at the sink, and you're starting to wash these dishes and you're thinking, wow, I really hate doing this. This is such a drag. It's going to take me hours and hours to do this before I can escape from it and have leisure time, right? And what Thich Nhat Hanh is saying is, no, live in the moment. Be with each dish as you wash it. Live in that moment. Let there be a rhythm. Feel the rhythm of the activity. Feel the calmness of your mind. That's what he's talking about, you know? So I just thought that was really good. And again, I highly recommend both of these books. Okay, so enough of that. Oh my gosh. Stop the madness. I love this picture, okay? Because this is every man and every woman in 2025. Okay. So, we're in such a dense material plane. We're surrounded by clocks. We're constrained by time, and we're constrained by space. And we have these physical bodies that carry around our soul, mind, and spirit. so we can navigate in this dense material plane. But look at what happens. If you're living out in the future, you're this person. Look at this person. She or he is walking up this kind of strange stairwell into a fog. And that fog is the future. Why is it foggy? Well, because it hasn't happened yet. All of your feelings, all of your thoughts, all of your words, all of your deeds create that future as you go. And so if you're living out in the future, that hasn't happened yet. You haven't laid the groundwork for it. So all it is a walk through fog. And you know what's funny about fog? If you drive, okay, people who drive on the highway tend to go fast, right? If there's a fog, interestingly enough, people tend to go faster in the fog, and I don't know why that is, because I don't. But people tend to go faster in the fog, even though they can't really see very far ahead. And maybe that's human nature. We're trying to escape from the bad situation by accelerating. But the problem is, that's how a lot of these multi-car accidents happen. You get all these people that are tearing down the highway through this fog, and all of a sudden the traffic stops, and you got this person tearing down there, and all of a sudden they see the brake lights and they slam on their brakes, but it's too late, and you have a multi-car pileup. That's what that is. Don't do that. Don't live out in the future. And then look at the past. The past is just water under the bridge. And you see the water is rising on this stairwell as this guy is walking into the fog of the future. Where is the present time? Where are the trees? Where's the sky? Where are the clouds? Where's the running water? Where's the ocean? You know? We have to live here in the now. And what this picture is perfect because this person is so ensconced in the future, and then the past is chasing them. They're forgetting to live in the now, and they're in this incredibly grim, like stairwell, and they're not even paying attention to where they are and what they're doing. Again, the gift that is the present moment. So, anyway, enough of that. Oh, I had one other story. Yeah, I can't help that. This is important. Um, if you're going to be with somebody, especially if you're going to be with somebody in a helping sense, like vocational guidance, you need to be completely present for that person, period. There's no excuses, there's no equivocations. If you're doing a counseling session or a coaching session with somebody, you've got to be present, completely there for them. And I used to teach, um, I've taught many classes of young professionals. I've taught, gosh, over my career, at least 100, couple hundred, 300 young professionals in helping skills. How do you really help people in an effective way? Well, you got to build rapport. How do you build rapport? Well, you got to be present for them. And so I used to, in my classes, they were graduate levels. So I would have 15, 20 students, and I would split them into two groups, right? One group I'd send out in the hall, and I'd say, okay, go out in the hall and just chat among yourselves while I work with this group, and then I'll come out and talk with you. We have an assignment that's a group activity that's coming up that is meant to teach us something really, really important. So they would go out in the hall, and I'd tell the people in the classroom, all right, you're going to play the client. You're going to play the part of the client in this activity. So when the other group comes in, I'm going to team you with somebody from that group. And what I want you to do is talk to them about a watershed event in your life, an event that changed your life or changed your perspective on life. And you can be as in depth as you want to be, but be ready to talk about this magnificent or watershed or terrible whatever event in your life that changed your perspective. That's important. So then I would leave them and go out in the hallway and talk to the other group. And what I would tell the other group is, all right, this exercise is about presence. It's about effective helping of somebody that you're working with. And so one of the things you got to do is be present. And what I want to do is a little experiment. So when you get back in the classroom, I'm going to team you with somebody. They're going to tell you a life event that changed their completely changed their perspective. You are going to pretend, you're going to give them the body language that you're distracted, that you're not listening, that you're not completely there. And the way you're going to do it is you're going to lift up your phone once in a while, look at it. You're going to let your eyes wander a little bit while they're talking, especially if they're talking about some especially deep part of what they're going to reveal to you. You want to kind of look away. And, you might roll your eyes just subtly, and just give them the impression that you're not really there. Okay. And then we're going to process the activity and hear how they felt in the face of that body language. And then we're going to hear how you felt in the face of seeming to not attend to them well you wanted to, because people wanted to be helpers. So I'd have them come in and would do the activity. Well, I had this one class, and it had this man in it who was a pretty intense fellow, and his watershed event was a domestic terrorist act where there was a bombing, and he actually lost a couple of friends in this bombing. It wasn't 9/11, but it was an earlier thing. And he had lost a couple of friends in this event. And I had teamed him with a young lady who was relatively new to the field, and she played her part brilliantly. Boy, she kind of rolled her eyes, she looked up, she looked to the side, she looked at her phone. She just glanced at it briefly. She was great. She was really doing good. And finally, though, I think she felt so uncomfortable. In fact, that's what she said later. She felt so uncomfortable with what she was doing following these instructions because the story was important and it moved her, and she really wanted to focus with him on that. But my instructions were, no, seem like you're not paying attention. So she seems like that, and she laughed nervously. You know how sometimes if you get real nervous, you giggle a little bit. That's what she did. And of course this guy was like, you're laughing? This event, this event, I lost friends in this event. This changed the way I look at life. And of course I stopped the activity immediately, but real learning took place there when we processed that as a class. I asked the group that was telling about their watershed events in their life, how did you feel? Well, I felt like I was being ignored. I felt like I was being disrespected. I felt like I was being, just I wasn't important to this person. And then I asked the other group, the people, the helpers, how did you feel? Well, it tore me up trying to roll my eyes and look at my phone because the story that I was listening to was so important. And I wanted to respect that person by really paying attention. Do you see? And so learning actually took place around presence. And the young lady who was new to the field later became an extremely effective vocational guidance counselor because she took that lesson to heart. And, during the activity, obviously she was mortified. It helped when we debriefed the activity as a class, but she learned from it, and the whole class did. So the moral of that story is be in the present when you're interacting with your pet, when you're interacting with your significant other, your children, your grandkids, your people at work. Be there. That's the moral of that story. Okay, enough of that. Let's move on. I love sailboats. Look at how graceful that is. Look at how beautiful it is. And here's this boat, the ship. It's a boat. It's small, and it's out of sight of the shore. and it's got 3 or 4 people on there, and they're out. It's a sunny day, it's beautiful, there's a gentle wind, and they've got the sails are billowing, and the boat is going in that direction. Well, guess what? If the wind changes, they're going to have to adjust the angle of the sails, right? And so if the wind changes, they're going to have to change the angle of the sails so the wind is still catching it. And then they're going to have to change the angle of the rudder so the ship continues to go in the direction it's going. That is called tacking. So, in what I did, this is how I did it in terms of achieving this state of mindfulness, at least most of the time. Because I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and tell you I don't struggle with this sometimes, because I do. And I mean, the reality is this is 2025. You've got your iPhone, you've got your work, you've got your, the news, you've got whatever it is you're doing. It's really easy to get distracted. And of course, the long-standing Wall Street fad is that we all have to multitask because we need to be lean here so we maximize profits for shareholders. And so you're trying to do 10 things at once at the job, and being effective, basically at none of them. So, it takes some time to make this into a habit. And that's why I have 21 days out to the side here. The current thinking around habits is it takes around 21 days ish to make a habit. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to do it right with you for 21 days. Because guess what? It is not going to hurt me a bit to undergo this exercise again. Okay. It's just not. Because each time you do one of these exercises over again, even after you've gone through it once or twice, you learn more and your knowledge deepens. And what I should say is instead of knowledge, I'm going to call it gnosis, Gnosis. And that means a working knowledge, a knowledge that you have built through doing something. That's called gnosis. So, anyway, enough of that. The first thing you're going to do, okay, is you got to really want to do it. All right. That's called volition. And if you read the first few paragraphs in step 3, Bardon talks about the 4 pillars of the Temple of Solomon, which is your inner astral temple. And those 4 pillars are the elemental forces within you that you now have taken control of through your soul mirrors, right? That's what that is. And so a volitional act, volition, is its own pillar. It corresponds to the fire element and the part of the divine face, the face of God, if you wish, that is all powerful, omnipotent, okay, omnipotent. The omnipotence is the God face of that, but for you, it's volition. And what volition is will plus action. You can't just have will. Because look, I mean, think about this. Sit in your chair and just do a little thought experiment. Sit in your chair and will yourself to get up and walk across the room and open a door. But don't do it. Just sit there and will yourself to do it. See how futile that is? All right. So in other words, the way our mind works, the way we roll as a species, is that we're going to look up and we're going to see something and we're going to decide, oh, I'm going to do something. And there's a nanosecond between when we decide we're going to do it and we get up out of the chair and start taking steps to make it happen. That's a 2-part process. And that's what volition is, will plus action. So you're going to make a volitional act. You're going to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be mindful for 21 days. Okay. Then you're going to use the big five, and you see I've got an asterisk over that. I'll cover that on the next slide, so hold that thought. But then the third thing is what I just talked about, the tacking. You know, you got to practice course corrections as needed, and what that looks like with mindfulness, okay, is you're going to get up in the morning and you're going to, yeah, I'm going to be mindful today. And then you're going to go to work and you're going to log in and you're going to be looking at your phone and you're going to be distracted. The minute you notice you're looking at your phone, the minute you notice you are distracted from what you need to be doing, okay, there at work, make the course correction. Put your mind back on the present time, back on the person with whom you're interacting. Be mindful. And so every time you catch yourself, you know, uh, do a course correction and get back on track. Okay, now let's talk about the big five. And remember, you're going to do this for 21 days. The big five. Oh my goodness. If you're just starting out with step one and step two, I've always felt that step one and step two kind of go together, but that's just me. Uh, you know, that's the first part where you're learning who you really are, you know, and to really take control of what is inside you. And these steps are just vital. I call these are the big five, and they are five very powerful techniques of spiritual alchemy that causes you to be able to use them to transform vices into virtues. That's what you're doing here. But there are other methods, and I'm going to introduce those later. But these are the big five that Bardon puts out there in steps one and two. So, but you know what? You're going to use every single one of these ongoing. You're not just going to use these to get through the soul mirror. Yeah, that's the first use of them. But they're extremely helpful when you're learning your new lessons, like when you're starting a lesson like, oh, I'm going to learn how to breathe in the fire element, accumulate it in my solar plexus, and then project it out into a fire, fiery sphere in front of me that I can perceive with my mind's eye. And that really is an exercise, in the future that you're going to do. These are going to help you do that successfully, right? Because you decide, we already talked about the volitional act. I'm going to be successful at this exercise. I will learn how to do this. I am. Actually, it should be in present tense. My correction. I am able to accumulate the fire element and manifest it externally in the astral and mental realms as a fiery sphere. That's your act of volition. I am able to do that. And then your auto suggestion right next to it, we know those as affirmations. And Bardon suggests he has a really good method of using these auto suggestions. What he says is you do it immediately when you're waking up. You're still half asleep and you do it when you're waking up. That's called the hypnopompic state, okay, of consciousness. And then immediately again, you do it right as you're drifting off to go to sleep after you've gone to bed. That's called the hypnagogic state, right? And so what you're going to do the minute you wake up, you know how you wake up and you're just kind of drifting, you know, as soon as you're conscious of that, launch into your affirmations, your auto suggestions. And the one I used in mindfulness was, I am completely present at all times in all situations. And my magic number for that is I would recite it 40 times, just when I'm awakening and just when I'm going to bed. And that has power because your subconscious mind, you're programming your subconscious mind through these affirmations. That's what that does. That's what you're doing here. So basically, when you do an auto suggestion, your unconscious mind is uncritical. It accepts whatever you tell it, just uncritically. It does. So, if you've told yourself you're a loser, You're a loser. You're a loser. For like 10 years, you've told yourself this. And now all of a sudden you've decided to get your act together and you're actually winning. Okay, it's something. And your subconscious mind is gonna bring you to a screeching halt. It's gonna say, wait a minute, you've told me you're a loser all this time, and now you're starting to win? Haha, we can't have that. Here, let me help you. I'll help you create a situation in your life where you engage in self-sabotage. How about that? And that's what you do. And that's why so many people have so many problems, because you got to be careful about the way you talk to you about everything, okay? And so autosuggestion is the conscious way that you can take control of your feelings and your thoughts by changing them. You're literally changing your mind. You're reprogramming it. It's like autosuggestion is like the Python programming language of Hermetics. So autosuggestion is extremely powerful, and it will help you with your exercises in subsequent steps. But right now, it's going to help you get control of these elemental forces within yourself and your mind. And I use breathing every day. And we're going to keep it simple here. What you're going to be doing is breathing in mindfulness and breathing out distraction. And if you're referring to the Kabbalion, that's the law of rhythm. Breathing, you breathe out what you want to get rid of, and you bring in what you want to bring in. And you create a rhythm through that breath. That's what that is. And there are some advanced techniques that I use in charging talismans and things like that that I'll introduce later. It's based essentially on hesychastic prayer. But right now, just keep it simple. Breathe in mindfulness, breathe out distraction, and just feel that rhythm, just like a tide, just like the ocean waves. And then the magic of eating and drinking, that is phenomenally important. The Christians call it Eucharist. And the idea is transubstantiation. So when the priest blesses the wine, it actually turns it into the blood of Christ. And when the priest blesses the host, the little wafer, it actually turns it into the body of Christ. And the idea is when you eat that and drink that, you are eating and drinking. You're not being a cannibal, but you're eating and drinking the body and blood of Christ. In other words, you're becoming that. That is becoming part of you on a day-to-day basis. Same concept here. I mean, in the morning when you get up, when you're working on mindfulness, you're going to take your drink and you're going to put your hands around it and you're going to say, and I practice through a Christian lens, so I'm going to say, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I charge this water with mindfulness. When I drink of it, it will nourish my body, but it will also nourish my astral body and my mental body with mindfulness, presence at all times in the present moment at all times and in all situations. That was my affirmation, and get it down. And you're saying that like 40 times, but in your auto suggestion, but in eating and drinking, you're doing the same thing. You're charging it. You don't have to do repetitions. You can do it once and just concentrate on it and imagine that mindfulness going into the water and charging that water. And then when you drink it, it's going directly to your astral body and your mental body, and it's nourishing them with mindfulness. That's how that works. It's incredibly powerful. And later, there are more deeper uses of that. When you get done with initiation into Hermetics and go into the letters, there are some things that you're going to learn, additional things about the Eucharist and how this transformation actually can work at higher levels of magical operation. And then the last one is washing. So you get up in the morning, and you take a shower. Cool. You know, and during that shower, tell yourself that I'm washing the dirt from my body, but I'm also washing what's the opposite of mindfulness? Distraction. So I'm washing away distraction. So as this water flows over my body, it is going to wash away distraction from my being, and it's going to go off my body and go down the drain just like the rest of the dirt. That's simple as that. There's some other context that I want to add to each of these because they're more than just what Bardon describes them as. But for now, this is what you're going to do, right? So this is these three, the washing, eating, and drinking and breathing, are in step one under the physical body. Auto suggestion has to do with reprogramming your subconscious mind, which is an aspect of your what Muni Sadhu calls your astrosome. He combines the emotional body and the mental body in one thing, and he calls it the astrosome. And then you have your immortal spirit. So, however you want to think about it, these are powerful techniques, the big five. And they are techniques of what I call active introspection, because you have to be on this all the time. And we'll talk about that far more during the soul mirrors, so I won't belabor it here. But now, more to come. My next video is focused concentration, and I'm really looking forward to doing that one. I'm going to try and release these things every Saturday if my work permits, because they're so important. These are things. There are a lot of people in the Bardon sphere, I suppose, in this group, this community, that end up coming in, and they get stuck on steps one and two, and they can't get through. They can't get through. They can't get through. They end up dropping off. I don't want that to happen to you. I don't want you to be one of those people that drop away, because these things are doable. If I did them, you can certainly do them. And maybe even more successfully than I did them. I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to talk much more about what I call active introspection. And I'm thinking of doing a special thing on active introspection, because there's so much more to that than just these four or these big five. But the next step is going to be focused concentration, and we're going to really add some context to that one. Because, yeah, I had a real hard time with that activity when I was in step one. So I want to try and make it a little easier for you. But anyway, farewell until the next video. This is Frater IAC signing off.